Daenerys Targaryen, the reign of the Queen of Ashes. Daenerys Targaryen, she was not born a queen, born of a storm, a mere spark of rebellion among the dust of her destroyed lineage. Made into a wisp of a girl, barely more than a child, exiled to a foreign land and traded as chattel. Sold as a prize to a warlord. Still, whispers followed her even there. Whispers of a Targaryen alone in the world with 3 dragons. Across the vast Dothraki Sea, she lived a life far removed from the opulent halls of her ancestors. The unforgiving sun beat down. The wind whipped at her foreign clothes, and the Dothraki tongue felt harsh on her exiled tongue. But Daenerys, with the quiet strength that defied her slight frame, began to adapt. She learned the Dothraki ways, the respect for horsemanship and the thrill of the hunt. She earned the wary acceptance of the Khalasar, her resilience and intelligence, a surprising spark in their nomadic world. Then came the day the warlord who had purchased her, Khal Drogo, became ill. The Khalasar was in despair since a weakened tribe resulted from a poisoned warlord. However, Daenerys disregarded convention and disobeyed even the witch who foretold Drogo's demise. She took a desperate risk and entered Drogo's funeral pyre while holding his lifeless body and the dragon eggs that were given to her on their wedding night. The fire bellowed, a horrifying sight, yet Daenerys came out unscathed, smoke wafting from her tresses. 3 hatchlings, their eyes glowing with an old fire, their scales gleaming like obsidian, were nestled against her bosom in her arms. The whispers became a roar. Daenerys Stormborn, the mother of dragons, a mythical figure returning to claim her birthright, had been reborn in fire and blood, breaker of chains, a liberator's burden. Human suffering radiated from Slaver's Bay. The luxurious towns constructed on the backs of the broken were engulfed in a stench of perspiration, terror, and rot. Instead of coming as a conquest queen, Daenerys, the banished princess with twilight-colored eyes, arrived as a whisper of hope from the wind, a dreadful portent for the slavers and a glimmer of rebellion in the hearts of the enslaved. News of her fire-breathing dragons preceded her. The Unsullied, a castrated army of young soldiers, were traded like cattle in Astapor. The bonds that held them broke with a single word and a flash of dragon fire from Daenerys. A turning point was witnessing the once stoic Unsullied cry aloud, overcome by the sudden gift of freedom. Once gilded cages for human slavery, cities like Yunkai and Meereen sprang into rebellion. As freedmen rebelled against their former owners, the clash of steel replaced the crack of the whip. I will not let those I have freed slide back into chains. I will not sail for Westeros. I will do what queens do. I will rule. After a cruel siege, Meereen, the so-called Queen of the East, submitted. Instead of coming into the city as a vindictive conqueror, Daenerys came as a liberator. She ended the slave trade and instituted a decent and equitable wage system in its stead. However, the burden of being a ruler weighed more heavily on her shoulders than any Dothraki armor. The former slaves, who yearned to return to their broken lives, and the freedmen, who were dubious of Daenerys's intentions and cautious of the foreign customs she brought, were the ones who first raised the murmurs of discontent. By preying on the freedmen's dread of the unknown, the old masters, who were always present in the background, fanned the flames of anger. Daenerys, the liberator, found herself caught in a web of political intrigue, forced to navigate the treacherous waters between mercy and justice. The line between liberator and tyrant began to blur, a question mark hanging heavy in the smoke-choked air of Slaver's Bay. Blood and betrayal, a viper in the nest. Westeros heard rumors of the Dragon Queen from across the narrow sea. Clad in malice and resentment, Cersei Lannister clung to the Iron Throne, a festering wound at the center of the realm. Daenerys sailed toward the destiny that had been denied to her family, her dragons trailing dark shadows behind her. Winds were quick, and when feasible, bloodless. Not just conquering, but fire and respect were used to build alliances. The Master of Whispers, Varys, knelt, secrets sewn into his garments. The haughty scoundrel with a secret family history and a personal crown, Jon Snow, bowed down. But strange shadows were thrown by the war's flames. A horrible sickness claimed the life of her faithful knight Ser Jorah, leaving a harsh pill to chew in the middle of victory. Then came the Viper's strike, betrayal from within. Her closest confidant, Missandei, a symbol of her dream of a just world, was snatched away in a cruel display of Lannister defiance. Loss gnawed at Daenerys, a chilling premonition of what was to come. Dissent, the corrosive whisper of doubt. The landing of the king, a monument to the tyrant Daenerys fought to overthrow. It was the embodiment of everything she had battled against. A lioness trapped in a corner, Cersei threatened to unleash wildfire, a warped reflection of Daenerys' own strength. The voices advised her to surrender. They were Tyrion, her most reliable advisor, and Jon Snow, whose allegiance she continued to doubt. But Daenerys' taste of capitulation was like ashes. She was not a knelt queen. She would reclaim her proper position because she was fire and blood. Mad Queen, the unraveling. Drogon's scorching breath caused the city gates to shatter, a terrible symphony of unadulterated might. With a wave of controlled rage, the Unsullied broke through the Lannister army. But the bells tolled in the middle of the mayhem. A false dawn, a capitulation. In a last-ditch act of rebellion, Cersei started the wildfire. The smoke-choked streets became rivers of molten misery. Screams broke the skies, both from the enemy and the innocents caught in the crossfire. Daenerys rode Drogon and soared over the flames. Anger flared inside her like a fiery spark. A dreadful clarity emerged as everything came together. Betrayal, sorrow, and the burden of a crown full of expectations for a world she yearned to free. Fire and fury, a queen consumed. The bells persisted in their frantic cry for pity, but it was heard no more. The storm itself became Daenerys, the Stormborn. Her faithful steed, Drogon, let out a frightening fire display, a macabre ballet with the city below. Structures collapsed, roads turned into funeral pyres, and the helpless victims' cries turned into a terrifying orchestra. Was there a release here? Was justice served here? Or was it just a dream turning into a nightmare? They can live in my new world, or they can die in their old one. As he watched the bloodshed, Jon Snow saw his beloved, the queen he had bowed to, turn into a monster. Ashes of a dream, a shattered vision. When the dust fell, the city was reduced to bone and ash. In the center of the realm, King's Landing rested a broken dream. With a flicker of twisted delight in Daenerys' eyes, Cersei had vanished. But the triumph didn't taste good. Her surviving Dothraki soldiers' applause sounded hollow. With a look of surprise and disappointment on his face, Jon Snow perceived her as an unfamiliar person. He witnessed the liberating flames turning into the destructive fire of a dictator, and the remnants of a noble dream burned to ashes. A crown of thorns, the price of power. Daenerys was in front of the Iron Throne, which represented her natal right and the end of her arduous quest. However, there was a throne erected on ashes, with a crown carved from fire and blood that seeped onto the floor of red-stained stone. The hollow victory song of the remaining Unsullied resonated in the vast auditorium. Where was the world of Justice Dream? Where was the hope she had sparked in the downtrodden people's hearts? All of it had been destroyed by the heat of battle, the murmurs of uncertainty, and the crushing weight of a monarchy that insisted on having all authority. The dragon's fall, a brother's duty. With his allegiance divided between duty and affection, Jon Snow found it difficult to accept the queen he now saw. He understood what needed to be done. He put an immediate and silent end to the Dragon Queen's rule when he did a heartbreaking act of plunging his own sword into Daenerys' heart. The halls reverberated with the sound of Drogon's roar, which was a monument to the dream, dashed and the tie broken as it circled overhead in sad anger. Aftermath, a kingdom in mourning. Westeros was in shock at the destruction. The center of the realm, King's Landing, was in ruins. It was up to the surviving lords and ladies to pick up the pieces after a bloody conflict. Suffering from the consequences of his deeds, Jon Snow abdicated his right to the crown. A fragile calm, based on the remains of a dream and a queen's passing, had come to the nation. The legacy of ashes, a question unanswered. There were whispers about Daenerys Targaryen, the Dragon Queen. Was she one of the Liberators engulfed in flames? Or was she destined to inherit the flaws of her forebears and grow up to be a despot? The answer remained elusive, raising questions about Westeros's past. Buried beneath the dream of a moral society inspired by a dragon queen, behind the rubble of King's Landing, is a sobering reminder of the costly price of retaliation and the lethal force of unfettered ambition. Decades melted into years. The psychological and physical scars from the battle started to heal. King's Landing rose from the ashes, painfully and slowly. The burned remnants were restored with new buildings, demonstrating the human spirit's tenacity. However, Daenerys Targaryen's mutterings continued, spreading throughout the realm like a wind. Street singers performed Dragon Queen tunes, some somber, some tinged with rage. Inside the Septries, Septons quietly discussed her legacy. Was this woman a martyr or a monster? The solution was still as evasive as before. A mythology developed in the Dothraki Sea. The final dragon, Drogon, was still hidden. Some said he had flown above the surface of the earth, seeking a new land where people would not be afraid of fire. Some murmured that he lingered in the shadows, waiting for his mother's wrongdoers to be at the proper moment to face his wrath. The Dothraki, their Khaleesi's loss leaving a lasting scar, refused to let go of the smoldering fire of a dream. The belief that the mother of dragons would return one day. A new dawn. A new dynasty sprang from the ashes. A council of women and lords decided to choose a different road since they were tired of fighting and bloodshed. Daenerys was right when she said that the wheel was broken. A whole new framework of consensus building and compromise-driven government was established. While it was a very flawed and unstable institution, there was hope for a future in which absolute monarchy would not have such strong control over society. Daenerys Targaryen, the Dragon Queen. Her reign was short, violent, and ultimately disastrous. She was a woman who dreamt of a just world, but became devoured by the fires of conflict. She was no ordinary woman. Her dreams came true, yet her narrative continued to reverberate. She was a cautionary story, a reminder of the risks of unbridled power and the alluring appeal of retribution. Daenerys Targaryen, the Dragon Queen, will be eternally etched in the history of Westeros. Whether through whispers of horrors or roars of liberation, the Khaleesi will reign whenever destruction and fury are invoked.